Hello, everyone. This is Verlita Odom, and thank you for joining me today on Verlita's Everything in Between podcast. On today's episode, we will be discussing the four major types of child maltreatment as defined by the state of Texas. And those are emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. Now, remember, please, that it is up to each of us to report abuse or neglect if we suspect it. In Texas, that number is 1-800-252-5400, or if you prefer to make a report online, you can do so at www.txabusehotline.org. Now, according to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, there are four major types of child maltreatment, and they are physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Physical abuse is physical injury that results in substantial harm to the child or the genuine threat of substantial harm from physical injury to the child. So physical injury can range from minor bruises to severe fractures or even death. And of course, those injuries could be caused by punching, beating, shaking, kicking, biting, throwing, stabbing, hitting, burning, choking. I mean, this is really gruesome, but unfortunately, if these things didn't happen to children, we wouldn't need this agency, but they do happen. And so when these things happen, it's important that we kind of know what to look for. And so the Department of Family and Protective Services says that if you suspect that there has been physical abuse to a child, these are some of the things that you would need to look for. So if there are frequent injuries, such as bruises or cuts, black eyes, burns, without adequate explanation. If there's frequent complaints of pain without obvious injury. Burns or bruises in unusual patterns that may indicate the use of an instrument or human bite, cigarette burns on any part of the child's body. Lack of reaction to pain. Aggressive, disruptive, or destructive behavior that the child is displaying. Or a child may be passive or withdrawn and emotionless behavior. Fear of going home or seeing their parents. Big indicator there. Injuries that appear after a child has not been seen for several days. Unreasonable clothing that may hide injuries to arms or legs. So those are just some of the things, that's a pretty extensive list of things that you might want to look for, or if you see those in the child, could indicate that there's some physical abuse going on. And it's also important to remember, you guys, as I'm talking to you about these things, that it's not always the parents. So I know that most people feel like, oh, well, mom or dad. Well, it could be an older sibling. It could be a relative that lives in the home or frequents the home, or a family friend. So, children are not always abused at the hands of their parents. Just to make that clear. The other form of major child maltreatment is neglect. And the department defines neglect as failure to provide for a child's basic needs, or for a child's basic needs necessary to sustain the life or health of the child, excluding failure caused primarily by financial inability, because sometimes there's some things that happen, or neglect that happens because the parents or the family is not able to provide financially. And if that's the case, there are resources out there that the department can connect the family to. So it's not an intentional thing. It's not deliberate. The family loves the child, but they may financially be struggling and just can't provide adequately for the child. And if that's the case, the department, again, does have resources, or they're able to connect the family to community resources in order to assist with that area. Obvious malnourishment, big deal, big thing right there. And this is intentional, meaning parents withholding meals from the child, not giving them the proper nourishment. Lack of personal cleanliness could indicate that, there's no water in the home. Torn or dirty clothes, same thing, may not have the ability to get to a washer or dryer, or any water to even hand wash clothing, or worn clothes, meaning maybe financially the parents are not able to buy clothes for the child. Another sign they want you to look for: stealing or begging for food. That is an indication of neglect. Child unattended for long periods of time, inadequate supervision or no supervision. Need for glasses, dental care, or other medical attention. And again, if you see a child and they have a mouthful of rotting teeth, or they're always complaining or crying about, tooth pain, they need glasses. And a lot of this is screened in school, still, as far as hearing, vision, and even dental. I know a lot of those programs have been cut, but some of this is still done in schools. And and parents are usually, or guardians are notified of the needs of the children. And if they're not provided for, that is a cause possibly for a call to the state for neglect. Frequent tardiness or absence from school, another indication of possible neglect. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse includes fondling a child's genitals, penetration, incest, rape, sodomy, indecent exposure, and exploitation through prostitution or producing pornographic material. And we know that this is unfortunately a huge issue. And it seems like here in the last several years, we've gotten more information, and the community has become more educated on the huge issue of child trafficking, child sex trafficking. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. That's pretty awesome. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other forums. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So if you suspect that there is sexual abuse occurring, these are some of the things you might notice. Evidence of injury to the genital area. And you might think, well, how would I know that? Well, obviously, if it's a child, especially if it's a child who's really young and you're helping provide care for them, showers, even babies, changing diapers, things like that. Those are the things that you would look for. Sometimes also, if a child is expressing that there's pain down there, that's something that you should notice and take note of for sure. Physical signs of sexually transmitted diseases, um, difficulty in sitting or walking, extreme fear of being alone with adults of a certain sex, sexual comments, behaviors, or play. And that is one thing that you will notice if you are around a child who has been sexually abused. They may act out those things on other children. And what we would call that perping another child, because now where one child is the victim, they have now become the perpetrator because they are now acting out the things that have been done to them. So you really have to pay attention to that. Sexual comments, whether they're made in school or to a neighbor or to whomever, you really have to pay attention to that. Sexual victimization of other children, and that's what I just mentioned. Knowledge of sexual relations beyond what is expected of a child's age. And, um, you know, the bottom line is this: if you feel like there could be something wrong, if you notice something that just doesn't seem right to you, again, you don't have to be 100% certain. That's not your job to be 100% certain. Your job is to report your concerns and let an investigator or the department look into that issue or that concern. Emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is mental or emotional injury that results in an observable or material impairment in a child's growth, development, or psychological functioning. It includes extreme forms of punishment, such as confining a child in a dark closet, habitual scapegoating of a child, belittling, and rejecting treatment for a child. So, suspect emotional abuse when you see these things: over compliance of a child, just extreme people pleasing, never wanting to ruffle any feathers or go against anyone or anything, low self esteem, severe depression, anxiety, or aggression. Something else you might want to look for: difficulty making friends or doing things with other children, lagging in physical, emotional, or intellectual development, caregiver who belittles the child, withholds love, and seems unconcerned about the child's problems. Huge issue. Okay. So obviously that list is not everything that you would look for, but it is definitely a great start. And again, if you suspect abuse or neglect, it is your responsibility to report that. And you can do that by calling the toll-free hotline, which is 1-800-252-5400. So again, you can report it via phone or even make an online report. I did pose a question the last time we were together about leaving children unattended in a car, and we had a lot of feedback on my Facebook page. Another question that people often have is, how old does my child have to be in order for me to leave them home alone? And for a lot of us, we know, a lot of people start babysitting when they're 12 and 13 years old. So just so you know, the state does not actually give an age for a child, but what they ask is that you, as the parent or guardian or someone who definitely knows the child, they ask that you ask yourself these questions. Okay, because basically what it says is Texas law doesn't say what age is old enough for a child to stay home alone. However, adequate supervision is critical to keeping kids safe. We know that. An adult caregiver is accountable for the child's care, and inadequate supervision can be a type of neglectful supervision. So please know that. So if you decide you're going to leave your kid home alone, you think they're, mature enough and okay, and then something happens, please know that, you can get a case from Child Protective Services for neglectful supervision. So what they say is you really need to think about these things. One, how old is the child? Are they emotionally mature and capable of being alone? Do they know the layout of the house completely? And as far as safety of the home, play area, or other setting, what rules have you laid out? Don't open the door, don't answer the phone, or don't go outside, that type of thing. Are there hazards or risks in the neighborhood? There are some people who live next to a lake, next to water, and or a busy highway. And so those things come into play if you have a child that you leave alone and is not really prepared to be alone. They could go outside and get into serious trouble and get injured or even die. You have to ask yourself, does your child have a mental, physical, or medical disability that would prevent them from being left alone at home and still stay safe? How many children are being left unsupervised? Do they know where you're going? Do they have your phone number? Do they know how to use the telephone? Do they know how to dial 911 for emergencies? So do they have a list of other responsible adults they can call if you're not able to be reached? How long and how often is the child left alone? So, these are all things that you have to think about, when you're deciding whether or not your child can stay home alone. So, you make that assessment, you make that determination, and every child is different. Like I said, you really have to be an adult who knows that particular child very well. And again, I always say, when in doubt, just take the child with you or find a babysitter. There's just nothing worth leaving a child alone at home and them not being prepared to respond in the event of an emergency. There could be a break-in, a fire, a water emergency in the house. There just could be a lot of things that could happen. So you really need to make sure your children are well prepared and make sure that they are emotionally able to do those things. Take care of any issues that may arise, or at least be able to call an adult to help in those situations. Also, are there neighbors close by? Do you live out in a rural area where the next neighbor's 3 miles down the road, versus in town or somewhere, even if it's not in town, versus being in a rural area, but your neighbor's right next door and they know the kids are there, and so they can kind of look in on them. So there's just a lot of things that you really need to take into account and things that come into play when you're making that decision. So choose wisely. Choose wisely, because again, you make the wrong decision and you could end up with a case for child neglect or neglectful supervision. Okay. All right. See you guys next time. That's all for today's podcast. I hope that the information I provided was very helpful for you. You can go to the State of Texas website for the Department of Family and Protective Services to find a lot of the information that I discussed today. But again, that's what I'm here for. Hopefully you're enjoying listening to Verlita's Everything in Between podcast. So if you are, show your support by sending a positive message. If you want me to improve on anything, I'm definitely open to hearing that as well. And you can contribute financially as well to show your support. And Anchor shows you how to do that. There is a donate button that you can utilize, and you can contribute weekly, monthly, one-time gift, whatever would be appreciated. So again, it helps me continue to publish episodes in the future and hopefully continue to provide helpful information to you guys. So that's all for today. Until next time, be well.